Hello there. We'd like to welcome you to the virtual kitchen table. We're Erin from Ever Learning, Ashley from Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves, and myself, Hayley from Taking a Kinder Path. We're gathering for conversations about family life and home education, particularly unschooling, which is sometimes known as self-directed learning, or as I like to call it, natural learning. We'll be sharing our experiences and ideas, learning as we go. We hope you'll pull a chair up to the table and join us.
Welcome back to the virtual kitchen table. It's Erin and Ashley here today. Hey, Ashley.
Hi, Erin.
How's it going this morning?
Good. You?
Yeah, pretty good. We're, I guess, technically in what is the first week of school here in Ontario, at least.
Yeah.
So that kind of makes it good timing. I think we were trying to figure out a topic. I mean, we have a big list of topics. A big list of topics. But I think we were trying to decide which, kind of what to chat about this week. And you kind of like came out of the blue with this post of Hayley's, which is actually perfect. And I don't think I have read this. I don't know how I didn't see this post of Hayley's in the past, but I don't think that I had. So it's perfect. So this is a post that she wrote, about five and a half years ago, it looks like. New to home education, your first week. And then I think I had said to you, the timing is kind of interesting because just maybe 2 weeks ago, I had put out a post. I'm going to have to find it now because there we go. And it's just sort of similar idea. I started by saying, if you're beginning homeschooling or returning to homeschooling and feeling uneasy in the midst of back to school season, here are some ideas to get into the groove. And I don't know, I liked that you brought this one forward because I think that, I think whether it's somebody who's new to homeschooling or whether you're maybe at a new stage of homeschooling, or maybe just you're not, but you're getting back into the swing of things, it feels like, sometimes what you see people doing or the suggestions can feel really open-ended. And it's kind of like, oh, just, live your life and enjoy your kids and, get outside and all these kinds of things. And like, those are all true. But sometimes it can be helpful to have some specific ideas. I just kind of think of it as like anchoring. Kind of an anchor point that we can still be really flexible, move around, but there's just something that we have kind of in our back pocket to kind of figure out what we're going to do. And I think especially if we are feeling maybe like pressure that we're not kind of doing enough with our kids, or we're not exactly sure what we have planned for the year ahead, it's just nice to have some concrete ideas. And so I feel like Hayley's post really kind of spoke to that as well. And what I like about it is the ideas that she has given, and I think mine as well. But I think I'm looking more at hers at the moment. Just they're quite relationship based, and so it's like it doesn't feel like a giant to-do list. It feels like here are some thoughts and possibilities that, they all kind of draw on the idea of connecting and kind of celebrating together as you begin your year. So, I don't know what your thoughts are about that, but.
Yeah, no, it was definitely I wonder what it was like. You could probably share about this, I guess, before social media, because I don't know, maybe probably more than 2 weeks ago, whenever I was on my phone, mostly on Instagram, you started seeing the back to school stuff, but you see it in the stores too, right? Like there's little reminders that it's back to school season. And I think that's why I kind of started thinking a little bit about this. And then I came across Hayley's post, and I think we're in our 6th year, I want to say, of homeschooling. And I definitely notice when it's back to school season. Of course, I don't think it's possible to not notice that, but it just feels so different. but I hear from others, especially, people who are new to homeschooling, or maybe they don't even have school-aged kids yet, but they're going down that road. And I don't know, the conversation shifts around, well, what are you doing? And what are you doing? And I get it, especially for those of us who went to school ourselves. And this time of year was always a certain way, right? Like, get back to school, get the supplies. Like, you just had an understanding of what this season entailed. And then when you kind of get off that path, or maybe you've been off that path, but only say for a year or two, and then the season comes back around, you're like, what are all the other homeschool families actually doing right now? So I remember really liking, reading and listening to other homeschoolers just talk about what they did. But the day in the life of a homeschooler, or those were really popular, probably just a couple years ago. But where it really got into like kind of a peek as to what do the days really look like? Because, like what you were saying, it's great to hear, like, keep your days open and have a rhythm instead of a routine. Get outside lots. Like, all that's good and true. And, that's kind of what we'll be talking about today, I'm sure. But I remember early on, like in the first, I don't know how, like first few years of the back to school season, kind of feeling like, should we be doing more? What is everyone else actually doing? And that is so gone for me. And it feels so much better. Like, it feels so good to not have that anymore. So I think, yeah, I just thought like, oh, maybe because we've touched on this stuff, and we have our deschooling episodes. I think our first episode was like something like, what do our unschool days look like? So it's not to say we haven't, kind of dived into this a bit, um, like on the virtual kitchen table before. But yeah, I just thought maybe something where we kind of get into, a little bit more of what that can look like. I just thought like that can't hurt. That might be helpful for people who are feeling it this time of year.
Yeah, and I think like there's kind of like two components to it. And I think we maybe talked about this because I remember last year around this time we recorded the fear of missing out episode, and it was kind of school based or school year based or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about the idea that like with the fear of missing out, and maybe it's similar to this, just around kind of, as you said, we're used to school, this time of year looking a certain way. If you've grown up in going to school, it's just very conditioned. It's almost like internal, as the weather becomes a certain way or whatever. And there's like us as parents and trying to figure out whether we're doing enough, or whether what we're planning for the year is enough, or kind of whatever the particular situation is. But then there's also sometimes our kids to consider, as far as, I mean, if it's a child who's coming out of school, I think families could probably feel a lot of pressure to maybe make things feel really special, or, just kind of consider the fact that this is such a big change for them. But even if kids haven't been going to school, I mean, they're aware of it, right? Like all the stuff in the stores. And it's just such a big deal is made of it. I was watching the news the other night, and here in Canada, the CNE. So you'd be familiar with that, actually. Yeah. But it's like a huge fair basically that happens like the last several days of August. And so I think it must have been like the day before school was going to begin, and the fair was, I don't know if it's planned that way, but the fair ends, the night before school. I'm sure most school kids were probably going home a bit earlier, but in the afternoon, they've been doing these interviews, and like almost the whole news about the CNE was this reporter going around and interviewing kids. So you start school tomorrow. How do you feel? What's your favorite subject? And it's funny because like the kids were, I think, just wanting to be at the fair, and he wasn't getting very good answers from them. They're like, yeah. No. It's like, what's your favorite subject? I don't know. And they might say, yeah, I kind of like to see my friends, but like they weren't, their head wasn't there. They were still having like their last day at the fair. And this reporter was just like relentless with these kids asking these questions. And so it's like, yeah, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. So even if your child hasn't been to school before, there's just that awareness of what time of the year it is. So I always think about that, how it's really two things. It's like us as parents getting started, and then what our children's expectations are. And then maybe sometimes those are even projections of ours. Like maybe we're kind of imagining what our kids are wanting or not wanting. So, it's just kind of interesting to think about. And as I said, I love how Haley really has stayed quite relationship based, but also some practical things. Like her first couple of points. The first one is grab a cuppa and relax. So, she's talking about how, like she says here, it's natural to feel excited and keen to throw ourselves full speed into a new venture, but try to resist the temptation to go too fast. Avoid rushing out and stocking up on workbooks, curriculum, and educational gadgets, or cramming the calendar full of events and activities. So that's that piece where it's like, yes, leave some open space. And yet I like that she goes on to kind of include some things that you can put on your calendar, because I think it's just nice to see a little bit of both, right? I think most families, if they're going into home education or they're continuing, they do want to have that white space on their calendar. But it can be helpful to have a few things set out. And I know, like for myself, depending on what your kids are like, one of my kids in particular, like it was really helpful if we had some things mapped out on the calendar, because it just felt too vast to say like, oh, we'll see where the week takes us. Like, it was just much more helpful to have some specifics kind of pinned in a little bit.
Yeah, we actually just did that yesterday. And that was just out of my youngest feeling that way, I think, and expressing a little, asking questions like, when does forest school start again? Because that paused for the summer. Are we going to go back out to doing the hikes? So I could tell that he was kind of, for whatever reason, feeling like, what does this time look like? He knew it was a new month. So we sat down and we did it. We didn't put it on the calendar. Well, actually, some of it is on the calendar, but together we sat down and we just wrote September, and we just started writing down stuff that, forest school's starting up. He has a movie he wants to go see, so that got on there just to get him to start realizing what the month kind of looks like. And he knows that, maybe there's stuff we can put on there, we can take off, we can continue to add stuff as they come up. But yeah, just so that he could start to see what would maybe be coming up and giving him an idea. And I think one thing that's helpful is it's just the organization piece. So I think a lot of us feel just a little bit more organized. And for me, it's kind of the change in the season as well. So I mentioned that yesterday as we were doing that little, activity, or what, it wasn't an activity, but little conversation where we were jotting things down. I said, does it feel like fall to you yet, or does it still feel like summer? And he was like, well, it's still summer. And I'm like, yes, 100%. So that's been a change for us in this back to school season, or for me, maybe I should say, because I was the one who went to school all those years, where September was like summer's over and it is now fall and it is school, which that's true that it's school, but it is still summer. And I like that. So the weather did cool down here for a bit, especially last week. It's kind of warmed back up and feels more like summer now. But it was great hearing him just, he looked at me and he's like, well, it's still summer. And I'm like, yeah, but as a kid, when I went back to school, I'm like, summer is over. So the things that we jotted down for the month of September were still, some of them were still very like summertime related. And I think that's kind of really helped us move into this time of year at a much slower pace. Like I don't feel like the end of August is the end of summer. And so it kind of stretches out. And I don't think the kids think anything of that. But for me, I'm very aware of like my summer's longer now all of a sudden. And it kind of keeps it like a slower pace, I guess. So I don't feel so, oh my gosh, our calendar's empty and we should really have more on there at this point. I'm like, it is still summertime. We are still summertime mode for another couple weeks or few weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, I relate to that so much. The last few years I've been thinking a lot about that, just really enjoying the last bit of August and those few weeks into September is such a beautiful time of year. And I remember last year, I think it would have been, yeah, I think it was kind of like what would be the first day of school. And I was hiking or exploring somewhere. And oh my goodness, the weather, like the beach was incredible and the forest was incredible. And I remember thinking, oh, it is just so sad that all the families have gone home because there's so much other stuff that starts to happen in September too, like just so many monarchs.
Yeah, I
And
was just going to say that.
so many monarchs and like the birds are doing slightly different things because they're just more present again because they're gathering to kind of get themselves together for whatever they're doing, whichever direction they're going in. And I think too, like just still so many wildflowers. I don't know, there's so much going on just like nature wise
Yeah.
that I think it really hit me that day. I was like, oh man, it is such a nice day. And then I came across some families who were out on the trails. And I don't know. I'm never sure. I don't want to ever be that person like, why aren't your kids in school?
Yeah.
Because we all get so tired of it. But I'm like, do you happen to be homeschooling? Like, and they're like, yeah, and we had this great conversation. And I love that because I just feel like maybe it normalizes it a little bit. And it's different than why aren't your kids in school? It's more of a celebratory tone. Like, hey, are you guys by chance, are you homeschooling? And so yeah, it was fun to see a few people out at least kind of doing that. But the weather piece is really interesting, that connection to school or not school, or
Yeah.
summer or not summer.
Yeah, and talking about, well, first of all, I love that you do that, Erin, because I'm still always asked, so the kids are always asked, why are you not in school? Which
Right.
it's just like, oh, because we homeschool. But if someone was like, oh, do you guys homeschool? It's like, why, yes, we do. It's just, it has a different, feel to it, I guess. So I love that and the normalizing of it too. But just listening to you talk about the weather, I was thinking as well, it's great. Like we had some really, really hot days this summer. So we spent more time inside than we have previous summers. And now that the weather's cooling down, we're actually getting outside more. And so I thought, a lot of times we think about that differently, right? Summertime is when you get outside and that's when you get all your fresh air and you do all your outdoor activities. But for us, we were inside for a lot of it because my one kiddo especially just does not do the heat. So we're getting outside more now, which wouldn't be happening. So it's kind of another way that we can, just keep things slow and relax and get back to enjoying outside time more because as a family, we tend to do that more in the spring and the fall. And then the other nice thing, I do feel like you, where I see empty playgrounds now or empty beaches, and I go, oh, I feel sad about that. But I also really like that the crowds are gone. So we do,
It's
I
really
feel like as homeschoolers, we celebrate that a bit as well. So people that know us have started to say like, oh, you guys are probably getting outside to all your places again now that we're all back. And I'm like, yes, we are.
That's so funny. No, it's definitely a catch-22 for
Yeah.
sure. Because it's so nice to have that open space. And what you're saying there kind of makes me think about how we can take on more of like an abundance mindset than a scarcity one, as far as we don't have to have that same like, oh, 2 more weeks of summer holidays, or we have only 3 more weeks, or there's not that same need to pack stuff in.
Yeah.
Somehow just knowing that it can flow into, as you said, when the weather gets cooler, when places are a little emptier and there's more space. It reminds me of the difference between having like a membership at a museum or like an amusement park or something, and how when you're just paying for the day, you feel like you've got to do everything. You have to see everything. But if you have, let's say, an annual membership, you can just there's just a different feel to it where you can just get what you need out of that particular visit. And that's kind of how I think about summer. We just kind of get, it is what it is. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of pressure, even as an adult. Like I've had so many people, so how was your summer? And they're
Mhm.
like they're waiting with anticipate, and I don't know. It's just so, I worked a lot this summer. We only really had one kind of getaway of sorts, and it was really good, but it was relatively short. And so, but it doesn't matter because like that doesn't all have to happen in like July or August or whatever. So just even for myself at my own age, I just like having, you can just spread things out more. We don't have to pack everything into, I mean, the Christmas holiday season is another one of those seasons where people are like packing it in. And sometimes I'm like, could we just get together in February maybe? Like I celebrate New Year's in February or Christmas in February, but like extra visits and stuff, it's like, I don't know that we need to see everybody in our lives in the week between like the 23rd and the 2nd of January. Spread that out.
It's a lot of pressure, and it makes me
school related too. Like these,
I feel like it. Yeah, it's not seasonal so much, right? It's not following the seasons and fitting things into the seasons, but very much a school calendar. And it makes a lot of sense for families who go to school, of course. But I think that's kind of something, I mean, some people maybe choose to homeschool. I mean, I know some people choose to homeschool because of that very reason. They don't want to follow the school schedule. They want more just more opportunity to spread things out and do things at different times and not be kind of so stuck in the school schedule. But it also makes me think about how, I'm going to say kids especially, but I think it's true for all ages. It's so much nicer when you don't have to rush around and you're just fitting things in to fit it in. I get it. And sometimes I guess it's just necessary, but everyone just seems happier and more comfortable and able to enjoy themselves more when the rushing isn't happening. And I think it can be really stressful for parents when they're rushing. So I'm just thinking about summer holidays, but it would be true for Christmas time or holiday time as well, where you have all this pressure because you want to do all these things for your kids and you want them to have a great summer and you want your family to have a great summer. But that, like, as I say it, I can feel the stress, and we know that our kids feel that, right? So I think when there is an opportunity to slow down, and spread things out more, there's just a lot less rushing, and less stress because of it too, which I think goes a long way. And I think sometimes you don't feel it. I remember actually people saying that during the pandemic, that once the pandemic forced everyone to stop and slow down, that's when they realized, oh my gosh, what were we doing before? Because I guess you get used to it, right? And you just feel like that's the way it is, or that's some people's experiences. But once you slow down, and for me with homeschooling, when we slowed down, like it took a few back to school seasons where I was like, oh, we still have a lot of summer left. It's actually not over. It took, I probably kind of noticed it a little bit the first year, but it was more so after a few back to school seasons where I was like, it is still summertime. I remember telling people that, when they would ask, how was your summer? I'm like, oh, we're still in summertime mode. It's not over.
I love that. Yeah, I've been saying that a little bit lately too. Just exactly. No, that's also true. And I'm just looking at Haley's post. I see, Ashley, we're on the route to a long episode.
Yes. We should keep
okay. So I just want to touch on, so she has a category here, listen to your children. And so I'll just read like a little piece of it because there's so much good stuff here, but there's a piece here where she says they may not have experienced, oh, sorry. No, let me hop down a little bit or I'll be reading forever here. Hold on. Okay. We can help our children feel confident in our loyalty and our love by making time to connect and listen to them, encouraging them to express their thoughts and respecting their opinions. So this is in relation to like kind of easing into the year and making our kids, a part of that. And so she says, if it feels right, you could hold a family meeting. This can be a great forum to share ideas and make plans for the future. Now, Sorry. So she says, our children enjoyed the process of agreeing on an agenda, writing up minutes, and taking turns as chair. But it doesn't have to be that formal, just as long as everyone feels heard and respected. And I think I've mentioned on here before that I hear so many families do this. They have these planning meetings, and I think it might have been when we were talking about lists, and I tried this with my kids because I kept reading about this kind of like sitting down as a family and figuring out what you wanted to do for the year ahead. And like that really didn't, my kids were just like, why are we talking about this? You already know. We've already talked about what we want to do. So I just want to say that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, but I know it works for a lot of people. And I think particularly maybe just like on the kind of vibe of your family or the particular kids, that opportunity to kind of put your voice out there as far as some of the things you're hoping to have happen. And it kind of makes me think too, I remember our homeschool group used to order these they were like day timers or like just planning books that we could get as parents, but there was also a kids version and that had like a lot more just kind of bigger space to write in. And one of my kids in particular really loved to have their own planner with the calendar in it and the place to put notes. So I just think like different things will obviously work for different people, but I think the common sentiment is, rather than coming forward and presenting what the week or month or year is going to look like, just really kind of gathering ideas in whatever way that works for your family. Just really including them in the process, right? Yeah.
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 Yeah. I think being and staying very open, like sorry, the kids are a little bit loud. Recognizing what works for us while also staying very open to what works for the kids. Like, I really like what you're saying because I mean, I'll just speak for myself. Like, I know I am different than my kids. Because I think I was like this as a kid too. Like, I would have been I've always had a planner. I'm like, give me a planner. And I love writing and I like to highlight and organize. Like, I just enjoy that process. My kids don't. Maybe one day they will. But right now they're not. So early on, I had this vision in my head as to what a conversation like that might look like and how that might go. And I wouldn't have thought this at the time, but looking back, it would have been fairly structured. It would have been way too long of a thing. I would have just made it too much of a thing, like an activity, which really comes from my experience, I think, from school and teaching. And just over time, I've learned that there's nothing wrong with that. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I've just stayed much more open to, going with the flow, even of the day. So yesterday when I, said, I did say, let's sit down. One kid joined me, one kid kind of came and went. And it was my younger one who was, kind of expressing not concerns, but like, what are we doing and what's coming up and when are things starting and feeling a bit bored and stuff. So I said, well, let's sit down, or do you want to sit down with me? And I took the piece of paper and I wrote September and I said, and we've done this before. So he knew what I was doing. But if he had have ran off and went and played, I wasn't going to be calling him back and saying like, no, like we decided to do this. Like I would have just revisited it another time if we needed to. And I think staying open, I don't know, it's making me think about strewing a lot right now as I say this, right? Like we just strew something. So in this case, like an idea of, do you want to sit down and jot down some things that we're going to do together? I can tell you some things that I want to do this month, and then you can tell me some things that you want. We can do it together. We can do it separately. We don't need to write it down. We can just talk about it. Maybe I'll write it down for myself so I don't forget what you say. Like, I think just realizing when you homeschool that almost there's endless ways of doing things, and that there's no right or wrong way of doing it. And it doesn't have to look like anything like school. It almost is like you're doing it just by living together. And you don't need to change that, right? Like, you don't need to formalize it in any way or structure it in any way for it to be just as valuable and helpful. Like, if it meets the needs and if it serves the purpose, then you're good. is
That's
kind of
good.
how I feel about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And yet it still leaves the space open if you do want to form, like if you have a kid who um does want to kind of, yeah, like I mean, Haley often talks about joy lists. And so it's like, yeah, if you have a child who wants to sit down and really get into that, because I think that can be really fun. Um, or I'm thinking back to during the pandemic, how people were kind of making fun of these color coded timetables that a lot of parents had, where suddenly parents had their kids at home and they were trying to kind of like just kind of peg their way through the day, right? Because how do we suddenly go from this to this? And I feel like there was a lot of flack kind of about those, and some of that came from the homeschool community, and some of it came from like just school parents themselves. I think like people had various reactions to having these color coded schedules. But for some kids, having a visual like that is actually really well, for some it might be helpful, and for some it might just be exciting, even if it's just initially exciting. And
Hmm.
that's maybe kind of an interesting thing to think about too, is that um, just because the first couple weeks feel a certain way, either really wide open or more like let's put together a little, a little schedule because that would help us kind of get things going a little bit better, doesn't mean that you have to continue that way. So I think that's the other piece, right? Is you can, I think if you come at things with like a playfulness
Yeah.
of like, hey, let's try this. Or,
Yeah.
if you have a child who's kind of like maybe they've just come out of school and they're like, okay, so what are we doing this week? Right. So
Yeah.
if it's helpful to say, I don't know, I saw some different templates. Do you want to plug some stuff in? Do you want to kind of play with what our day could look like? Um, you can do that because those are just tools.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about this in so many kind of different ways, but those tools can just be like, the tool is not the problem. It's the
Hmm.
attachment to the outcome of the tool, right?
Yes.
So those things, like you're saying, Ashley, like how you love planners and day timers, and that can just be really fun for kids, for parents, whatever your personality is, right? So
Yeah. And I think
yeah,
not feeling stuck to it, or this idea that you have to commit to it, that it's not
yeah,
okay. Like we're always saying, like, well, I'm always reminding the kids, you're allowed to change your mind. We can change
yeah,
our minds. We felt this way, now we don't. Like stay curious. And I feel like kids are naturally more like that. But yeah,
yeah.
especially someone who's maybe come out of school, to give those reminders that we can try this now and get from it whatever we get from it, and then we can be done with it. Or we can, like for me with a planner, I don't use a planner daily, but I often pull a planner back out. I take breaks from it, I guess. It's just whatever I feel like. If it's helpful at the time, I
Mhm.
use it, but it's not something I use all the time.
Yeah.
It is making me like actually think about the next thing on Haley's post, because I think this is definitely true for a lot of parents, and then again for some kids, where because her next spot is make a menu plan, because it can feel like the days are just too open. Like when you just look at the day, and I still can absolutely feel that way. I don't know if I'll ever not feel that way. Well, I probably will at some point, and then I'll really miss these days when the days were just wide open and we didn't know what we were going to do. But when she talks about making a menu plan, honestly, when I first read this part of Haley's blog post, I was like, oh, because she's actually talking about making a menu plan. And it is so smart. And it is actually something I'm going to start doing that we don't do, because I think it's such a good, like, anchor, what you were saying, like an anchor to the day. Because we all need to eat. We all are going to need dinner at the end of the day. And it is a great thing to get the kids involved in. I say, like, I don't have a great attitude about it because I really, cooking, unfortunately, is not a passion of mine. It's just not. I try to embrace it more and enjoy it more. And when we do have a bit of a menu plan, I do find it a lot easier. But I think why she has it in here, what I really like is that it kind of gives you a starting point. And I like how it's not academic focused, even though if the kids are involved, there's clearly so much learning that happens in there. Um, And it's something you need to figure out every day anyway. So it's really practical as well.
Yeah.
So I thought, because as a new homeschool parent, I never would have thought of this as a way to start organizing or thinking about what do our homeschool days look like. I would have just thought that was like a kind of a chore that I had to take care of. But you can really turn it into something more, and it just gives you. I forget how she says it in here, but it really gives you a starting point for the day and figuring out. And she, of course, leaves it flexible to like you can do this. You can do a menu plan for the month. If that seems too overwhelming, I think she says you can do a menu plan for the week. And I think you could even say, just for that day, decide that day that, okay, we're going to spend some time this morning, whoever's interested. We can talk about what we want to have for dinner. We could do a trip to the store. People can help prep. It's still so open, but it gives you a starting place, I think.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm similar to you, Ashley. I don't love cooking. I don't, if I have to I have to pair music with cooking. I can't,
Mm,
I just need something else to
yeah.
kind of get through it. I don't hate it, but there's nothing stimulating to me about it. So I need, some sort of other, so like you too, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Make a menu plan. And this one too makes me think about how, well, there's two things. I kind of read it from a couple different perspectives. One, if you kind of are able to get yourself, if that's one more thing that you're not thinking about, then it kind of lightens you up to just really enjoy being with the kids. Like you don't have this other thing in your head around making food because you've already kind of made that decision was already pre-made, right? So I think about it as kind of helping maybe parents stay present with their kids then as we kind of
Yeah.
this first period of the school year, or for some people what might be like a whole new journey. So it
Hmm.
set off the radar. But the other thing that I got thinking just as you were talking is it fits so well with what I often think of, like, because we talk about unschooling, but we are living in a period of, like we say, oh, learning through life. But the one of the challenges is we live such a modern life that so much of our life is done for us. Like, we can put clothes in the dryer. We can quickly get something pre-made. We can, even if we're doing fresh vegetables, you can buy them pre-cut. Like there's so many different pieces. And I mean, I'm not saying everyone chooses those options. Like I definitely hang my clothes a lot of the time and I do chop a lot of my veggies and that kind of thing. But the point is you're not going to go without food if you haven't grown your own carrots.
Hmm.
Right. So there's something to me about bringing this in where I guess what I'm getting at is that I think some of the challenge around conversation around like unschooling and self-directed learning is because we've never really had an era of time where either adults or kids would have this much open time to decide what to do. So you think about all the different, like, I'm trying to think what they're called, like the project kits and stuff that you can order. Like there are all these different things that you order in, and essentially they're mimicking things that 150 years ago, both kids and parents would have had to be doing for an actual purpose,
Yeah.
like a cooking kit or a little building kit or whatever. Whereas living through life, well, a lot of life was spent surviving.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't in like I don't mean like horrible conditions, but just the practical means of getting through the day. And so much of that has been, anyway, that's maybe a whole other topic, but that's where I think we get into some of this, like, what should kids be spending their days doing?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I just like it from that perspective because I think it's such a neat thing for like planning within the family of like what, and it also offers a lot of opportunity to come to consensus, to find out what different people's preferences are, to figure out how to compromise a little bit, how to open up, how to be more open to other possibilities. I don't know. I think that like growing food, buying food, preparing food, cleaning up after food. Those are just, they're good conversation. They're good points of conversation. And I mean, a lot of our relationships are related to meal times and budgeting and those kinds of things. And I can remember when we had Sue Elvis on, I can't remember what the episode was. And Sue was saying she doesn't love cooking.
Yeah.
Remember, you looked so excited.
Yeah. It's not just me.
Yeah, not just you. But the other thing that Sue has talked about is that meals can kind of be like touch points as far as when people say, well, what do you do all day? And meals can often be really good times for conversation, for reading aloud. You know, just, I don't know, meals can be common times to come together and talk about things or read things. Honestly, as my kids got older, we didn't always eat at the table, and we would sometimes plan a meal around watching a movie together.
Mm-hmm.
Or there could be like everybody was kind of coming in from different activities, and it might just be like a comedy show we watched in the evening. So I feel like people are more interested in like the family sitting around the table with, but sometimes it's TV tables watching a show and just going back up to the stove for seconds if you want it. Like meal times don't have to be a certain way.
Yeah.
Right?
It's another example.
Or, sorry, one more thing. Or it could be if you are kind of really wanting to take advantage, because I'm thinking of like September for us was very similar to what you're saying. It was outside and apple picking and like doing the outside stuff. Maybe we're just trying to figure out like packing a picnic, or do we want to hit like a chip truck or whatever?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's all part of meal planning too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love that you got into that, because I was kind of thinking that as well. And that's very much like our experience. And people, I was talking to, I think it was Serielle that I was talking to, who we've had on before, and she's in the community. And I think I was on her podcast, and I said, I forget why we were talking about this, but I shared that our family often doesn't eat dinner specifically all together as a family, which I think even surprised her. I know I've had conversations with people where they're like, what do you mean you don't eat all together? Like, that's such an important time. But I mean, and there's various reasons why we don't. But one thing with homeschooling, and my husband works shift work, he's often not home at dinner time. So the kids and I felt very flexible to pack a picnic or watch a movie and had a lot of fun, planning like pizza and a movie or something. But we do that when he's home as well. But I think that made it feel a little bit more open and flexible for us, because Dad he's often not home for dinner. But I do like what you were saying around it being an opportunity. Well, a couple of things that you said I really liked, but an opportunity to learn about other people's preferences. Like my one kiddo is very sensitive to different smells. And as we know, if you're smelling something you don't like, you can lose your appetite. So sitting close together hasn't worked well for years. And to force that because, family dinner time, that didn't make sense. So often still in the same room as us, just a little bit further away. And that was an opportunity for them to learn that their needs and preferences matter, and also that we can compromise and make it work. But I'm even thinking about if some people like to listen to music while you're eating or watching a movie together. Like, you can have a lot of fun, but it is about learning about different people's preferences. The other thing you said about meals, and I hadn't thought about this in a while actually, but it kind of being like an anchor point in the day. Maybe it's just not maybe I'm just used to it now, but I remember talking about that, I don't know, a year or two ago, around kind of what our unschool days look like, and meal times being touch points, kind of like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then a couple snack times. And I mean, we are often together during the day, but as you know, like you kind of go do your own things and come back together. And often we do come back together for meals or for snacks. So I think that is also helpful to kind of help think, like, what does our day look like? And you can plug in those well, we need to eat, roughly around these times. You don't need to say from 12 to 1, it's lunchtime. But everyone's probably going to be hungry around lunchtime. So that's kind of helps maybe map out your day a little bit or kind of give you a sense of the rhythm. And it's, yeah, like the coming together often makes sense. Whether you're meeting in the kitchen to grab food or you're making something together, it just kind of naturally works. I don't want to move on too fast if you have anything else, but I feel like it's going into the plan some fun things to do together so nicely. Because that's a good place to start with doing that, is make some exciting dinner plans or maybe plan a little picnic out for lunch or something, or have breakfast, out on the patio or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think if you're wanting to make it a little bit special, kind of coming into this new season, like the idea of just doing that together, right? Like not just planning fun things you think your kids will like, but really involving them in it, and planning it together. And I love this. There's a middle part here that Haley has. Make this time with your children a celebration of the time you get to spend together. Plan some outings you'll all enjoy. Maybe there are places locally you've been meaning to visit but never seem to have the time. And just that first part, make the time with your children a celebration. Like, I think we forget, and again, probably because there's in the media, it's like, oh, back to school, like they make such a thing of it. And I think somewhere, probably subconsciously, we feel that. I know I've heard people talk about this as far as like just their subconscious attitude about Mondays and Fridays. Even if they love their Mondays, and maybe there's something on Friday they don't even like, but there's just something cultural in our minds that like to dread Mondays and love Fridays. And so I think we can get into that too with the school seasons, and just that reminder to like, this time together. And really thinking of that as a celebration, as being grateful, not just kind of trying to kind of slot stuff in to fill the time. And there's some of that too, like, if we're not having a great day or our kids aren't having a great day, and sometimes there are seasons where it seems like there's a lot of that. And with certain dynamics, there just can be a lot of that. Like, I don't want to paint, I think it's like, oh, we're just celebrating life every day, because life can be really, really hard. But I mean, it sure doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to just kind of keep that in mind. Because if the reason we're not celebrating the time is just mindset, rather than circumstance, or rather than just somebody genuinely struggling, sometimes it's just we're just not thinking about it that way. We're thinking like have to, rather than what do we get to do. Yeah. A shift, right?
It is a shift. And I was laughing pretty hard there, because just this morning, which here is right in our region, is day 2 of kids back to school. And my 2 were having a morning together. The oldest one isn't feeling great, so tolerance and patience is low. My husband was trying to sleep because he worked late and he has to work again tonight. And we ended up all just this time, we all ended up laughing at the end of it. Not usually how it goes, but oh my gosh. And I made a joke. I said, and today is day 2 of back to school, but here we are all together, because we were really having a moment. And it's just funny, right? Because there are many moments where, like in any family, you're just like, oh my goodness. And sometimes those can be kind of long stretches. I don't mean to say it's, just 5 minutes or even half an hour here or there where there's rough moments. Sometimes there are full days, sometimes there are full weeks, sometimes there are full months where you're just like, oh my gosh, things are not working. But it's just funny and I think I was laughing at it and everyone else started laughing, because I knew that we were going to be having this podcast recording afterwards. And I'm like, here we are having our homeschool morning that's just chaotic and people are not happy. And it was just kind of funny. But that's just reality, right? Like, that's just the way it goes sometimes. And as you were sharing, it really made me think about how I think what helps me is thinking about is everybody's needs being met as best as possible. And like I said, my one kiddo's not feeling well. So, that changes how the day goes, because they're tired, and we all don't have the best days when we're not feeling well. And then you put a younger sibling in the mix and it can go south quickly. But I think, yeah, kind of like keeping perspective, I guess, and thinking about what's our mindset. And I have those conversations a lot with both kids, but my youngest one, especially, who gets to do a lot of fun, cool things, can all of a sudden have a day, and this happens often enough, where he just feels down and we're not doing anything, and just really down about things. And I kind of have been figuring out how to validate that. And we all feel that way sometimes, but also kind of help him shift perspective and check his mindset a bit and be like, well, like, hang on a second, and kind of like give power back, saying, does the day have to feel this way to you? Like, can we turn this around a bit? Like, and I think that can be true for all of us, and sometimes that's much easier said than done. um, but I often come back to thinking about, and I think each of us do in the family, how homeschooling really allows us to just have all that time together, and we wouldn't trade that, even though there's those really tough moments. um, I mean, if we were at school all day and at work all day, we'd be prioritizing those family dinners, right? Like, I completely understand why that's important for so many families, because all families are wanting to have that time together. um, but with homeschooling, like, there is so much space, and I don't want to take that for granted and be kind of grumpy about it, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, I like what you said about the mindset.
Well, that's funny that you said that, because it brings us Haley's next point. Hang out together a lot.
Yeah. We sure do.
Unless it's not a good day.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but you know what? The way that I feel she's framing this too. So she says, and in between the outings and days out, spend lots of time together at home. If you have younger children, get on the floor and play with them. Color and draw, build with Legos, make cookies together. If they're older, maybe watch a movie or two that's been on your kind of like I'm going to put quote someday list. Enjoy each other's company and let the conversations flow. Be open and interested in their ideas and appreciate the chance to slow down and learn more about each other. Spend an afternoon making joy lists together. This will give you lots of ideas for how to spend the coming weeks and months. So that's just kind of the beginning of that section. But I think, like, what this brings to mind for me is that I've also heard conversation from people who say that they feel pressure to play, like the idea of
Mm-hmm.
when I'm reading about the getting on the floor to build Legos. And I get that. I think particularly people struggle sometimes with pretend play with their kids. I can get into pretend play pretty easily. For me, it's crafts that I struggle with. Like, I really have a struggle with crafts. Just getting motivated to do that. So I think we all have our things. So I guess I don't want to say this in a way that guilts people if they're not wanting to engage in pretend play or like be on the floor playing Lego or whatever.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I do think to some degree, this isn't going to come out the right way. So I'm saying this, but I'm probably going to retract it at some point. So to some degree, it's our job. Like, I guess where I'm going with this is, yes, it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. Yes. Okay. So we can frame it that way as well. But you know what I'm saying? It's our responsibility at that moment. If we have agreed for our kids to be home from school, or we have chosen to do it or whatever. And so as much as I want this episode to be about, like, just kind of easy breezy ways of coming into the year, I do think that sometimes really being present and engaged with our child, not just agreeing to it, but actually trying to kind of see it from their perspective and really leaning into the interest. Because what it does is it gives us like a common, like if I think about movies that I've watched that I really didn't want to watch, but I'm framing it like this is our day together. It's not necessarily just about like my Saturday night of what I want to watch. They're really into maybe like fantasy, I'm just going to use that example because I'm not into fantasy, but I found myself watching entire series sometimes because that was the way of connecting. And same thing with sometimes book series. And I've also said no to things sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've said, you know what, we can read together like these first 2 books, and now I need a break. I can't. Yeah. I can't do this again. Like a whole another 400-page fantasy novel. I can't do it right now. Right. So I think there's space. I don't mean that we forego our own rights and kind of let them roost. But there's something that I notice, and this isn't really a homeschool thing. This is just from being out at parks or gatherings or whatever, with this kind of idea that like kids should always just be playing and doing free play. And I think that free play is so super important. Like I do. And when I say free play, I guess I'm meaning more like either play on their own or play with other kids. But when we have a wide open schedule, we can't expect, especially some personalities, to be just, so sometimes I'll hear, I mean, it's more school parents kind of lamenting summer and being like, oh, we have to pack in the time. They just can't fit, they just get bored.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, but I think we have to look at our own role in that as well. I'm probably opening up a whole other thing here, but I don't know. I think when we take the responsibility on, there are going to be times that we have to dive into things that aren't our most comfortable place. It's not just about, and I know there's a thing about every day being a Saturday. Like, I get that, but to some degree, sometimes there's some discomfort for us as parents too. Like,
I think you've explained this really, really well. And I'm glad I think you explained it really well. And I think it could be another whole conversation too, which would be cool. But I think it's really helpful. Because I agree with everything you said. And I'm just thinking about myself and how I feel during the day. And this is actually something I probably spend a ton of time about questioning and wondering, am I involved enough? Have I said no too often? Do I need to be saying yes as much as I have been? Like, that's where I find, and I don't mean to say it's like a stressor. I just find as like a homeschool parent, I'm spending my time, because yes, it's okay for the kids to be bored sometimes, but there's also a point where there's not enough for them and they're having to deal with boredom way too often. And then I feel like that's my responsibility to come in and support in whatever way that looks like. But I really like how you said, and I think there's someone who calls it sites of mutual fulfillment. I think it's Lucy.
Yeah, Lucy Aitken. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And that kind of always comes into my mind. I won't try to explain it, but that always comes into my mind when, like, for example, my youngest one asked me to sword play. Like he has toy swords and he's really into that. And he loves that type of play. I really don't. I don't like accidentally having my hand hit. It's, the thing is going in front of my face. It's just, it does not do it for me. But I 100% say yes sometimes because it is so his thing. But, we have a conversation about it. Like, I remind him, I can do this for a couple minutes. I really don't want to be hit. I try to communicate with him what my comfort level is with it. And he doesn't have a blast with me with it, but I can tell he appreciates that I don't say no every single time. I say no often, but when I say yes, he's very happy. So I think it's that much more meaningful to him. And actually what you were saying with the arts and crafts, I like that. I can get into that. My kids are not so into it, but I don't know, last month, I guess, we got into making our own weapons. And as soon as there was interest expressed, I carefully started pulling out the supplies because I was like, I can get into this with them. I know that I can enjoy this. And that's so nice when you find those things where you can meet. Now, I will say with that, I ended up creating a lot more of the weapons than they did.
Right.
And I could have been like, guys, this was your idea. You know, we've got all this stuff out and we plan to do this and it's just been sitting here. And I remember I was, worrying that the cat was going to get into the paint and everything, but I didn't. I just recognized that they were involved with it as much as they wanted to. I know they're not into arts and crafts the way I am. And I was just like, I don't mind doing it for them. And I kind of, I guess, yeah, picked my mindset with that and moved forward with it. But it is so great when you can kind of find those things, and you're going to actually in this part where she says, if they're reluctant for you to join in or immersed in a single player game, prepare some tasty snacks and drinks and hang out with them. Let them tell you about the game they're playing and spend more time observing what they love about it without passing judgment. I love how she included that because I think that can be especially true with older kids as kids start to get older as well. And it definitely makes me think of some shows or YouTube videos or video games where, that I'm not into, because we can find shows, movies, video games that I enjoy as well. But that doesn't mean that, well, I've got examples with both kids, but, well, my oldest one right now recently just got back into Pokemon Go, which I can do a bit as well. I can enjoy that enough, but not for as long. So that's when, if we haven't checked in at some point, like the whole bringing tasty snacks or like a can of pop or something, like a treat, over to connect. And, maybe I'm not investing a lot of time watching Pokemon Go, but I can listen about it and we can still come together for even just 10 minutes. Like it doesn't have to be an hour session either, like those brief moments of connection. I don't know, there's just lots of little ways, or even just care, like I'll bring something to their room that, to help them put it away. And if they're in there, it's like a very small little connection thing without having to always be doing all the things with them, because you just can't.
No, yeah, like it just exactly. And I like that Haley she included it from both angles, like be present, but then also sometimes they might not be asking you. And so yeah, like as you're saying, like it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And I think that when our kids are feeling that we value what they're doing enough to connect with them within those things, they're not going to ask us for everything because it's already filled from that. Now, I can think of times, families I know who felt, I never really had this happen with my kids, but I know of other families where it just felt like the pretend play requests were endless. And apparently I was like that as a kid. This is here that I was always scripting for everybody had a role, and I was just constantly in this state of pretend play, and it was exhausting. It sounds like it was exhausting. So, but I think like they move on from that eventually, right? So I'm not saying that maybe some kids' cups aren't full with that quite as quickly as others are, but I think often if they're feeling like you're valuing what they're doing and they've had a chance to show you, you'll get a break at some point.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's letting them know when you'll be available for it.
Yes.
Like just them know, because and I think we forget about that sometimes. So sometimes it's like, I can't do this now, or I can't do this today, but I will make sure I'm available at this point so that they know it's coming.
Yes, because I feel like we get caught in the like the conversation around this kind of stuff. We can get caught in the like polarities of it. So it's like, kids need to learn to play independently. They need to learn how to deal with boredom on the one side. And then I think you can also get caught into, never feeling like you can say no to your child and always having to be the engaged parent. And there's a place in between for sure. But I think I think when we're talking about really kind of trying to get connected and it's so helpful if you're planning together and you're having those conversations. Like,
Yeah.
you want to do this? Sure, I kind of have this much energy for that today or this much time. And then I need to go clean up from lunch, or I'm going to
Mhm.
get ready because we're going here or whatever. I have found, and I don't have like a specific blog post of Sue's, but I have heard her reference Sue Elvis, how she would talk about like, what shall we do today, basically.
Mm.
So I think it's the idea that as a family, they were kind of like blocking out what their day looked like. And it didn't mean that they were going to spend every moment together, but it was a collective, because even if they're spending time individually, like I know for our family, even if you're planning not to spend much time doing something together, just having a sense of what part of the house might be helpful for you to have, or what are you going to be doing as far as like what time might you want to be eating a meal, like just starting your day, or in this case your week, just like, what does this look like, what shall we do today, or what shall we do this week, and slotting in that balance of individual and like group stuff.
Yeah, it's a good way to kind of figure out how to do life together.
Yeah.
So you still are getting to do your own thing,
Mm-hmm.
but recognizing that, yeah, you're in a family, and
Yeah.
you want to try to fit it all together to make it work as best as possible.
Right.
Yeah. So the next one is read aloud with them. So I was so excited for this one. Because again, this seems to be for us a good example. And maybe I don't remember exactly what she says under this one, but it's like an anchor in our day. And I have you and your son to thank for our current book series that we're into, because it can be tough to find. I mean, when they were little, we could go to the library and get all the picture books, and those would be our read alouds. But now at their ages, we not only need to get into novels, but I really prefer a book series, because it can be so hard for us to all agree to start a new book, which obviously you start a new book in a book series, but once you're hooked into the series, that's a whole different experience, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to get the same buy-in from, and I mean, I only have two, so for people with more kids, if not that you have to do read aloud altogether. For our family, because we have run into it. We're reading Fablehaven right now, and we all love it. But my one kiddo wants me to read a lot more often than my other kiddo. So there is still, and I think it was my husband at one point said, "Why don't you just continue and then?" Or like separate it, or continue with one and not the other, something like that. And there were a few reasons why we didn't do that. But one reason was because it helps our days so much to have a shared read aloud, like as an anchor point. If they're bored, if there's lots of bickering and fighting going on that day, someone's not feeling well and they just need more downtime, but they don't necessarily want to be alone doing nothing. It just, and sometimes we read for a long time, and sometimes we read for maybe 20 minutes and then we put it away. So yeah, reading aloud is like, when we don't have a book, oh my gosh. So
Boy,
much better.
boy, I'm so glad that you guys are enjoying Fablehaven. And yeah, he was happy, because you make recommendations and people are like, oh, but to actually hear that you guys have enjoyed it, so that's are enjoying it, so that's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, the read aloud thing is oh, and like we've talked about this before in various places, actually, how like we neither of us, I think, really had that experience beyond maybe a few picture books as kids, as like reading something together as a family or with a parent or whatever. But boy, does it ever, like, it gives you so much common context for your relationship too, just that goes way beyond the book,
Yeah.
just other stuff that comes up, cultural references. I don't know. We always liked to, and I don't think this is the case, a possibility with Fablehaven, at least not yet. But if there was a book that had a movie that was
Right.
along with it, just kind of comparing those two or whatever. Um, Yeah, it's such a good one. It's such a good one. And it's Haley has, it's not, I don't see it linked here, but I believe she has other writing about the idea of like shared reading. So like when I'm thinking about read aloud the way we're talking about it, I'm thinking about like us as a parent reading to our kids. But I think too, as kids get older, not when they're young, but I think her thought was like people would take turns in the family reading. So it
Hmm.
wasn't just the parent's voice always doing all the reading, because that can get tiring. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, being the read alouder can be can be tiring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think as her kids got older, I remember her talking about like more of a shared reading where everybody who wanted to, right?
Yeah.
Like took a turn. And we've definitely done that with older, like I kind of had like the word book club just feels like it's not quite right, but like a reading group
Right.
uh, when a couple of mine were older, and we did that as well. And then that was just really fun to hear the different voices and stuff that they would come up with. And yeah, so anyway, off on a bit of a trail there about the read aloud, but I love that one.
Hmm.
Um, so the next one is give them lots of space. So, along with all the fun outings, the hanging out, and the reading together, let them have time and space to play on their own or spend time alone in their room. Quiet time to relax and to think is important for us all. Um, and then she goes on to talk about the things that we can be doing
Hmm.
for ourselves or for the family during the time that they're doing their own thing. And so, I mean, that time for them to unwind, I mean, just even like on a physical and um, physiological and psychological level is so important just to have those resets.
Yeah.
But I do think too, especially if you're coming into a part of the year where you're looking for like, what have we done today? It can
Hmm.
be a little bit harder to let go. And because it's not when we're not doing something with our kids, or maybe they're not doing something that's really visible to us, it doesn't feel as easy sometimes, right? It's not very like quantitative. It's like, what are they doing?
Hmm.
And I think especially as kids are older, maybe like even getting into like the high school years, there's more and more of that where we don't actually see their learning. Like I
Right.
notice so much of that. My kids still now, my kids will say something or do something, and I'm like, why? How would you know how to do that? Why do you
Right.
have information? Where did you get that from? Because there's just so much when they're kids. Like, first of all, we're supervising them more, so to
Yeah.
speak, but
Yeah.
also they're often like externally processing, right? So
Yeah.
they're asking questions about the things that they see, but kids don't always keep doing that as they get
Yeah.
older. So I think, yeah, just kind of knowing ahead of time that, maybe this time of year is a time of year where it seems even harder not to kind of see like quote evidence of learning. But in the long run, kids learn better if they're well rested and have a chance for their imaginations to, kind of just run without us always curating a new activity.
Hmm. Yeah. It makes me think about when, whenever you are filling up, or whenever we are kind of filling up our calendar, we don't do that up too often, but it can happen, right? Like I'm even thinking about for families who sign up for sports or music lessons, like signing up for those things where you do mark it on the calendar. Or maybe it's like party invitations and stuff. When it just seems to more naturally be filling up the calendar, this is such a good reminder to intentionally make sure that there is still those days where there's nothing that day, nothing specific, or even appointments fill up the calendar as well. And that's kind of helped us where if we look at the week, or more so the week or the month works, or even the season sometimes if you're signing up for like 10 weeks of lessons or something, to kind of spread things out a bit and say, okay, so Wednesday's our quiet day. And, we can decide to go do something, but we're not going to set something for every Wednesday because my goodness, we need the middle of the week because the ends are busy or something. And this is something that just shifts and changes so much. And it's something where some kids need more and some kids need less. So I also think about, the different types of rest. And that was helpful to me a few years ago when I learned more about what, I recognized that slowing down was really helpful as a family. But kind of looking into like, well, what is rest? I understand rest is valuable, but is that just not doing anything? Is that just staying home? And then looking at the different types of rest, which I won't remember what they are right now. But in thinking about the different types and how that might look for each of us in the family, and if everyone's having enough time to access those types of rest, I guess is what I'm saying. But yeah, making sure that I think it's almost even just permission. Like it's okay to give that space for rest, and you don't have to, because again, just speaking for myself, coming from someone who was in school forever, you felt good, like you were doing something right if your calendar was full of stuff and you were being productive and you were doing things and you're seeing people. And there's no question of, is it too much? So it's been a I guess journey to decondition that and recognize that. And I can still very much feel it, but my hope is that with my kids not growing up that way, resting just feels more comfortable to them than it does for me, because I'm getting there. But still, if I'm being honest, like
it's funny as you say that. And did we do an episode about rest? Because I remember you talking about learning about the different types of rest.
Yeah, I don't know I can't think if we did a full
maybe
episode. I feel like there was an episode, but
yeah, okay. Anyway, it might have been like a self-care episode or something.
Oh, maybe that would make sense.
That the rest would be like an interesting yeah. But anyway, I too, I'm thinking about like how yeah, you're saying like it. Well, the way I'm interpreting it is, there was like nothing ever felt too much. Like it might have felt too much, but it never felt like it would be perceived as too much. It's kind of like load up as much as you.
Yeah. Look what all you're doing.
Yeah, keep doing. Be as busy as you can, And I'm thinking too about how some of this sometimes with like the deschooling process, you almost maybe have to. You almost have to go a little bit in the other direction a little bit. So what I mean by that, I saw something this morning online, and it was a family, and they were showing their daily timetable. And it looked really like a lot of stuff to me. Like they started at 8:30 and it stopped at like, I think 9 at night, because they were including like, music practice, like all these different things, right? But they had like two different sections. They had two different things that said rest, and that was like their rest periods. And it reminded me of like school, like in kindergarten classes where they'll have like a rest period, and how that's always kind of felt funny to me, because I remember being in kindergarten and not really, just kind of like looking around.
Yeah.
Not being very tired at rest time. But sometimes maybe when you're kind of just trying to ease into this, actually carving out that maybe you do need to do that for a little while, or maybe you might want to consider just to, like, as I said, if it is easier to slot things in for a little while, then slot things in that are positive.
Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? So sometimes it can be helpful if it doesn't feel like, I guess what I'm getting at, what you're describing, Ashley, is like you've done a certain amount of work and a certain amount of like what Esther Jones would call unraveling, I think, just in general, as far as the way that you think about your time and the way that you think about rest. And so for you and for your kids, you've all probably reached a point where you're listening to those cues. Somebody who's just brand new to having this open time at home, that hasn't been developed yet.
Yeah.
You can't actually expect kids to come right out of school and parents to come right out of like the school zone and suddenly be like listening to their bodies and like resting as they need it. Like that's just not there yet. Right? Like for me, I wouldn't even say it's fully there, just because of the type of schedule I have. I have to be more mindful of like, hey, between this and this, I'm going to I'm going to stop by some trees and go for a walk in the woods,
Mhm.
or I'm going to take this time and try to have like a 40-minute rest,
Yeah.
just the way my schedule is. So sometimes I think it feels kind of schooly to do that, but maybe that helps people really kind of marker.
Yeah.
And even for kids that have been home for a long time. I mean, I've heard parents talk about this with bathroom cues, or
Mhm.
kids list, maybe just checking with them. Are you thirsty? Offering
Mhm.
whatever. Not all kids are noticing their cues the same way.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, so yeah, I'm just saying sometimes when they're positive things, maybe it doesn't hurt to actually schedule them in.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I'll just quickly mention with that, that I think actually I found helpful with the idea of resting and was learning about like menstrual cycle awareness, which we've
Yeah.
talked about on here. And I don't know, a couple of years ago, learning about that and recognizing that, just the way my body works and stuff, that there will be certain days in the month where I have lower energy and I will need rest more. And just learning about that and having more awareness of that gave me something to kind of like a bit of a guide, I guess. And of course, if I did have energy one of those days I didn't expect to, that was okay. But like you're saying, it just kind of helped me stay focused on it a bit and be more intentional, I guess,
Yeah.
about it rather than just, well, we'll see. Well, we'll see. It
Yeah.
kind of gave a little bit of a guide, which was helpful.
Yeah. No, exactly. Um, okay. So, Haley's next one is get outside, which is funny timing because our last episode was about outdoors and nature study. And we talked uh,
Yeah.
a lot about being outside. Um, I love this one, and I included it in the post that we kind of referenced at the beginning, um, because I think that it's just a game changer. And I think that if, like, let's say you were a family and you hadn't connected with a homeschool group, and you didn't really have any other friends that were homeschooling, and you just wanted to get out of the house.
Mhm.
And I think that was one of the things that I had said is it's just going to change your frame of reference, right? You go outside, you almost it's hard to walk almost anywhere if you're paying a little bit of attention and not see something interesting. And then usually those things are things that like your kids might want to follow up on. Maybe you're kind of interested about it.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know, if I go for even like a 10-minute walk,
Yeah.
the number of things you notice,
Yeah.
even if it's just the clouds, like even if you live in a really urban area, and there's just, you're going to see, or if you live in an urban area, you're going to be seeing other things outside. You're not necessarily, and there's lots of nature spots in urban areas too, don't get me wrong, but let's just say the particular area you live in,
Yeah.
you're mostly seeing, maybe the clouds or whatever, but it doesn't always have to be nature that you're seeing when you're outside,
Mhm.
right? You might be coming across people, checking out a new store, going to the library, um,
Yeah.
just noticing stuff, right? A cat running down the street. Like,
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff you then have time to enjoy and have fun with.
Yeah. Yeah. I found when they were younger, um, so when we were new to homeschooling, getting outside was, I mean, it's always been a bit hard for us. It's a transition, right? To go from inside to outside. So I think, I mean, sometimes it was easier than others, of course, but I remember getting to the point where we didn't have a homeschool group yet, but I recognized that if we got outside even for just a little bit every day,
Mm.
it made a big difference. It just made our days better. And I had to remind myself that because it did get hard. Like it was hard to, especially if it was winter and they had to get all their gear on, or we had to load everything up if we were driving somewhere. And then when they got out, they were putting their mitts on, and it can be a whole thing. So it's sometimes it feels like a big challenge, but I always found, for the most part, once we were outside, wherever we were, everyone got into enjoying it in one way or another, and it felt better when we came back. And then as they've gotten older, that can still be true, where we feel good once we get outside, and we don't get outside every single day. I usually do because I recognize that, like you said, even going for a 10-minute walk, I feel a lot better. So I usually, and I'd say most of us get outside every day, but there's certainly days where that doesn't always happen for all of us. But going out now for a purpose. So, well, I mentioned Pokemon Go is a hit around here again. And Pokemon Go is that game where the idea is you go and you look for your Pokemon and stuff. So sometimes that's what going outside looks like now. And my oldest kiddo is going outside a lot right now because of Pokemon Go. But sometimes it's going to get the mail at the post office, which isn't far. Like we have a post office we have to walk to pick up the mail. Sometimes it's dropping something off at the neighbors. Like there's just like there's a purpose, I guess, or there's a practicality to it, or maybe we'll choose to walk to the grocery store to grab a couple things instead of drive. I think we've talked about that maybe before, or it was probably the last episode, I guess, where we're talking about how, how you get outside or how we maybe encourage other people to join us outside can look different at different times. But yeah, and I think well, we talked about this in the last episode for sure, but I know I felt pressure at times as a homeschool parent that like it was outside time was so important and you weren't doing a great job if you weren't getting your kids outside enough. And I just don't think that's helpful. So I even look at it now, like I had mentioned, it's cooling down a little bit more here. So now I'm like, okay, well, some of us weren't outside a whole lot this summer. Maybe it'll look like we'll get outside a lot more before the snow comes.
Right.
And just having that openness. But yeah, it's always, there's so many things so many opportunities outside.
Yeah. And first of all, I'm still trying to, I didn't know that. So we get our mail directly to our door. So I'm interested that you walk to your post office to get mail.
We walk through our park.
Makes me feel spoiled. Attached to our house.
We used to have that too. I've had it both ways, but where I grew up, our mail didn't come to our house, and we had to walk or drive to the general store to get our mail. So I've had it both ways.
When we grew up, we were in the country, and we walked to like a common. We didn't even have a general store actually, so we walked to like a common. I don't know. There was some sort of
like a box.
It was green, and the 12 of us that were living in the hamlet, I guess, each had a right. And then I think by the time I was like a teenager, we had our own mail. We had like the standard rural mailbox where you put up the flag, and anyway, we had that going on. But anyway, that was an aside about mail. But I just wanted to say, like, I think too, like the outside thing, you can also have fun with like. You can do the planning outside. It can be like, hey, let's go grab some ice cream, or let's go grab some whatever. Like even just fun stuff like we have here, you would have it too, like the Bulk Barn, which is like a huge bulk food store. Even going and each choosing a few things, like, because that's just, I was thinking of the mess when I was thinking about ice cream. So, going and grabbing some stuff if we're going to be somewhere for the afternoon, and just kind of like having open snacks on a picnic table and brainstorming there. There's just something sometimes about like getting out of the house, even though you're into homeschooling, I get that. But sometimes just kind of like having a more neutral place to kind of brainstorm and think about ideas, or just, you don't even have to be brainstorming, just go to a playground and, come back and enjoy the snacks you bought. But I always found that like partnering something with something else.
Yeah.
So like, as I said, each person choosing something and then going to the park.
Yeah.
Like it just gives you, it makes it feel like it's a bit of an outing. And then I also just wanted to say too, like the outdoor piece, if you were doing something more, sciencey, like going to a trail, or I don't know, something like that. Like we talk about deschooling, but you're not going to be, if you're new to homeschooling, and even if you're not, we're just not always, sometimes we do want to do something that feels like we've done a bit of science.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
so if it makes you feel better that you've gone and done a bit of pond study or
Yeah.
something, right? Because you can do it in a fun way,
Yeah.
which we talked about in our last episode. Give it a
Yeah.
little plug. You can do that, right? You can do some nature study and just keep it kind of fun and open-ended. I remember, I wonder if they did a post on it. There was something, if I can find it, I'll link it. They did they spent a day going to different fast food restaurants and just going to the takeout and getting fries. And they basically did a day of taste testing. So they would
Fun.
get one package of fries at one place. When you could do that with Chip Trucks, you could do that with any number of things. And it just gives a little bit of purpose to kind of like a fun segue back into something, right? Like, yeah, I don't know. I just find stuff like those ideas are always kind of cool.
Yeah, my kids would love that. They'd be all over that.
Yeah, and just I don't know if they did a vote. I think they did a vote and they made like a poll and everything. But anyway,
That's fun.
But yeah,
Right. No, that's fun.
Yeah, and then her last one, attend a local home education group. So this is obviously hard if you haven't found one.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the reasons people haven't found one, I think, is because they haven't found one that fits.
Yeah.
So that journey has to start somewhere.
Yeah.
So like, why not the first week?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you don't have to do that. You might just want to ease into things with your family. But if you're wanting to maybe make potential connections, you might find a group that doesn't fit. Like maybe they're more into co-ops and you don't want to make that kind of commitment. But maybe you meet somebody there. Or maybe somebody says, oh, but I know of this other group.
Yeah.
You don't have to stay with that group. But
yeah.
Check it out.
Yeah. I think it is a good time of year because around here anyway, there just seems to be like the not back to school picnics or get-togethers, and people just seem maybe a bit more motivated to be like, oh, I've got to go find the people we're going to connect with throughout the year if we haven't already, or we're looking to meet new people. And you're so right about you're probably gonna have to try some different groups out to find what works. That can be, some people get lucky early on.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was, what you said about how, maybe where the group that you're at or what they're into isn't quite what you're looking for, but they know of, I find that like, even though we have our Facebook groups and stuff, I find when you're at the place meeting other people, that's how you learn about all these other groups that you're like, I had no idea that, there was even one this close to us that was happening. It's kind of through word of mouth, and you have to kind of get out there to hear those things.
And your kid might really kind of connect with another kid on the playground. Just because you don't stay with the group. Yeah. Or it doesn't work for a day that you have available or whatever, it doesn't mean that it might not work to say to the other family, like, hey, this day isn't going to work for us, or this group doesn't, I don't know what you're going to say the first day, but you might come back, right? And kind of be like, I'm not sure if we're going to continue, but those individual friendships could maybe continue. And I think sometimes for us around here, it wasn't really necessarily even about a group, but if there were various activities happening, you could just hear about that, right? It might be that somebody was planning like a field trip somewhere, or maybe there were like swimming lessons happening or something. And you hear about those things by talking to other people. So I think I would add to that to just kind of go with an open mind that you're not necessarily finding your forever family. You are, for both you and your kids and your, spouse and whatever, you are just kind of tapping, it's an activity, and you're tapping into different possibilities just to see like what might be available, or what, because you might not, maybe there's like a group that's super nature oriented and you're thinking, okay, that's too outdoorsy for us, but you might still hear about a couple of cool trails that you might want to try on your own. So to me, it's kind of like being on a bit of a fact-finding mission of super curious at first kind of, I'm saying week or month. I mean, obviously beyond, but I think when you get into it a month or two, you start to feel a little bit better too.
Yeah. And it can be, I think one thing that I found, even when the kids were younger, but definitely as they get older, is you can go to a group and you might find that you find it really easy to hang out with that group of parents, and your one kid is, run off with one of the other kids or a group of the other kids, and then your other kid is not finding someone.
Yep.
And I know I've talked to some other families who, you kind of have to find a group, or the hope is to find a group where everyone feels like they have someone there to connect with. And when you first go, you just don't know who else is going to be there, what the ages of the kids are going to be,
Right.
all of that. So I think, yeah, because you can get your hopes up, right? You're like, oh, we're going to go to the homeschool meetup and we're going to have a homeschool group. And I think that's where like the online communities can be helpful too in the meantime. Or, I mean, you don't need to stop with an online community once you've got an in-person community, but I think they're that much more valuable when you don't have that in-person homeschool community to connect with other people. Because it's not just about socialization and time together. It's being able to, feel like you're talking about what other homeschool days look like and stuff. So you can do that online as well. And I think in your post, actually, that was one of your slides too, was finding community. And I think you mentioned online community.
Online?
I think so. I'm jumping ahead, but I know that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's the end of those are the
it is.
Haley's points, or was there anything further?
No, you're right. You're right. It's,
so,
that was.
Like looking at mine, I've just kind of pulled it up here. A lot of it is very similar to Haley's. Just looking here for anything that's a little bit different. So this one, I think I was actually inspired. I have to give Kendall a little bit of credit for this, of Spark to Flame Home Learning, because we had been part of a community Zoom meeting, I think, and we were just talking about like seasons and supplies. And so I was saying, do some new season supply shopping. It doesn't have to be back to school, right? It can be, what do we want for this season? And then you can mix it up. If kids want to have like their traditional like erasers and pencils and all that kind of stuff, then that's great. And they want to have notebooks. But maybe it's something else. Maybe you're thinking, maybe it's bigger, that as a family you want to think about getting a telescope or something, or I don't know, but just kind of having something fun as you begin the season. I think when I added that to the post, I was thinking smaller, but you don't have to follow like a school list. It can be as many stickers as you want, or it can be Play-Doh or art supplies or whatever. So there's just something about like that newness. Is kind of fun, right? Of just like, you can still decorate something. You can still
do a setup.
Things that feel really like interesting and like kind of enjoyable to you.
Add something new. No, I love that.
And a lot of these we have talked about. I want to add libraries in.
I was just going to say, yes. I was like, libraries.
Always talking about libraries. And here's another piece where I think it hits a lot of angles. So you might see some other families in there. So it might be a point of community connection. But even if it's not a point of connection with homeschool families, you're going to be like, you're still connecting with like your local librarians, like whoever's in there. But I think too, it's sort of, it fills that gap of like, I feel like we should be doing some learning. I feel like we should be doing something, right? So in my post, I just said, let kids wheel their own baskets and choose their own books. And then you wheel yours, collect some that you've had in mind for the family, plus a couple just for you. So what I picture is, because I know I've heard this conversation before, like, should kids just be able to go in and choose like how many books do we need to take home? And maybe parents have the sense that they won't get used or read or whatever. But within reason, I think it's always so fun for kids to just have their own basket, choose their own stuff, even if it's not the stuff you would choose, even if it's like a Barbie story or Hot Wheels or just the stuff that you're probably don't have in mind, but it's attractive to them, right? And there's probably stuff in there that you haven't considered that might be. So I always thought of it kind of like letting them choose their stuff. And then I would have some things in mind that I thought would be interesting, probably like a little bit longer term for us. I would choose those things. And then I would try to get something for myself as well, because it feels like it's like a family outing to the library. And like, we're a learning family. Like, it's not just about them, but it's also not just about me. It's just like a collective visit. And when you're there, there will usually be events posted.
Yeah.
Right? Possibly even a segue to find out about, if not a homeschool group. I know our library was pretty instrumental in connecting homeschool families, but even if not, there's going to be other family stuff probably.
Yeah, it's the different
socialize in the evenings too. Like, you don't have to just socializing with homeschool families.
Yes.
Right? Like, you can be at home for the day or out at the park for the day, and then maybe there's no other kid, but then your social time, you can meet other families at a bingo night at the library, family swim.
Yeah.
Right? You don't.
No, that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And the library is a great spot for that, because I think it's common for them to have, maybe not call them after school clubs, but kind of after school hours, having, like, I know ours has a Pokemon club and craft times, I don't know, different things. So yeah, if your kids, if you haven't found those other homeschool kids, or maybe you have, but they don't, like in our case, like our homeschool friends don't live in the same town. So going to a library program is a great way to meet some new kids who, they might be going to school during the day, but we can hang out with them on the weekends or when they're done school. Yeah, and then our library also has a maker space. So I'm even thinking, a lot of families don't go to the library. So, and I think you can't go wrong to encourage going and borrowing at least books from the library. But I know some families who are maybe new to homeschooling and have this time might be visiting their library for the first time as a family, and they'll see that it is more than books. Like, they've got, like ours has now, you can borrow puzzles, but I know some have like exploring kits or games. Ours has a maker space, so you can go and do nothing with books, and you can go in and make your own buttons and they have a 3D printer and all the fun things. So yeah, I think it's just, I mean, we always talk so much about libraries because they are just so good. And I love the little posts that come up saying, and maybe I've done one, I'm not sure, where it's like, what do you need to homeschool? And it's like a library card. But and the books are great. That's a big part of it, but it's more than books too. Like, there's so much, and it's just an outing. It's a nice place to go on a rainy day. And it's nice for families because it's a library, so you're not spending a whole bunch of money maybe going somewhere else.
Like, so abundant. I saw it, I'm not going to remember it, but I saw a quote the other day, and it talks about, like, I think it was something like a library is the closest thing to infinity, or so. Like, it just feels endless, right? Because there's the books that are there, but now with online resources that they have, it's just like, oh.
Yeah. Oh, and ours has, well, I mean, libraries typically have computers, but ours has this, I think you saw me post a picture of it or maybe a video, but I don't know what it's called, but it's basically a table, but the top of the table is like a huge iPad is the best way, like a tablet.
Oh, yeah.
And it has all these interactive games on it. And our library, I don't know, just got that this summer, I guess. So you never know what you might find. And I feel like libraries often, really want to know what community members are looking for too. I definitely request certain books, but I think they're pretty open to, if your kids are interested in starting their own type of club or program or something. I think most libraries are pretty open to that, those different suggestions as well. So it's nice to think, like, just beyond books as much as we are there for the books as well. And that's fantastic. But
so many things.
Yeah. So that's a good one.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the only other one that I had here that isn't sort of what Haley had already talked about, is just how I ended mine, which just said, keep firmly in mind the fact that this can be a difficult season, and there may be various triggers and wobbles that can lead to challenging interactions, and even us projecting our insecurities onto our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just went on to say, plan for checking in with yourself and getting some rest and space to reflect. So
Mm-hmm.
I think just having an awareness, right, that we might be feeling inadequate. We might be feeling frustrated because we're excited about meeting a new group. And then we get there and it's not a fit, or our kid doesn't like it, or nobody showed. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
People don't show up to an event that looks like people are going to show up to.
Yeah.
Or you're excited about starting a new read aloud or something like that, and
Yeah.
you're the only one excited about it. Like it's just kind of inevitable probably that there are going to be those moments. And so just kind of reflecting and being aware that, yeah, we don't want to always be projecting that onto our kids, that like we needed the entry into the school year to look a certain way,
Yeah.
and it doesn't for various reasons. And I was thinking, like, I think one of the most difficult seasons, I would say, and it wasn't just the beginning of school, it was the whole year actually was difficult. And of course, we had lots of good memories as well, but it was actually our second year of homeschool.
Mm.
Because of the way that the ages, as you know, work here in Ontario, our school, like most kids begin in junior kindergarten, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's like junior kindergarten, then senior kindergarten, then grade 1.
Mm-hmm.
So junior kindergarten was not such a big deal because, well, first of all, we were still tapped into a lot of the early learning things. So my eldest really did best being out and socializing and having a lot of things to do. So, and not that we didn't have fun at home, but we really kind of needed a plan, and that's how things worked better for us. And so we were tapped into some of these different resources, and at like 3 or 4 years old, it was still working for him to go to some of those. And even if some of the other kids were in junior kindergarten, we were still able to go because we had younger kids.
Mm-hmm.
And he was still familiar with those toys. He didn't really notice whether there was another 4-year-old there or not. Like, it wasn't such a big deal. So there was still lots for us to do. And I think it was more the following year that would have been like senior kindergarten. And his junior kindergarten year, we did tap into a homeschool group. So we were doing lots. And I'm not sure why the next year it felt like less, but I think some of the things in the homeschool group were almost geared to older kids, and he wasn't quite old enough for them. So we were still connected with that group, but it felt a little bit patchier as far as what we could do, basically.
Yeah.
But he had just moved far enough out of that early years age, that preschool time, that it just wasn't working as well anymore to kind of go, because there was a bigger age gap. The other thing that happened at that time is that our early years centers became more age segregated. Okay. So it would be like 0 to 18 months. Well, I couldn't really take him, even though I could take my daughter. Like, it was just a funny year where we had those first few years of his life, this rhythm of like going to the resource center and going to the library story time, and it suddenly became trickier. And I do remember just like not knowing what to do every day, because he was 5, and we read lots of books and we watched lots of shows together and we made Play-Doh, but my husband worked really long hours at that point, and it was like, okay, now what? Because at that age, there's really not, he knew his numbers, he knew his colors, he knew his shape. Like, as far as like conventional, like, there was no curriculum to do. He knew all that stuff. So it was, he just knew that from playing, right? Yeah. So it was just like, it felt like it was great to have all this time to play, but also a little bit difficult. And so it was a year where I found myself sometimes like driving by like Burger King playlands, you know what I mean? And McDonald's playlands, and being like, maybe there's a kid by 3 o'clock that will be there. And we, it's just stuff, or like trying to find a playground with kids who would play. Yeah. And I don't know why that was so different, because junior kindergarten, it seemed like not an issue with the homeschool group, but I'm wondering if some of those families, I can't quite remember if a couple of key people moved or what happened, but I just remember that year of like the second year of kindergarten thinking like, man, what are we going to do all day? And I can't say that I think we still were part of the homeschool group. So we did what we could, but it wasn't quite enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just saying that because it was what it was.
Yeah.
Just a hard year.
Yeah.
I don't have any big answers for it. I feel like I was as resourceful as I could be, especially with younger kids, as well. And it just was what it was. And the only other time for us that I've really felt this sense of like this transition would have been my eldest first, like the high school, like the official high school year.
Right.
And so that year we went to a water park for about 3 days, and it was just because then it's just totally off the table.
Yeah.
You're on holiday.
Yeah.
And you're not even, I remember that year being hard too, just knowing whether we were making the right decision because he was up in the air about it. So there were a lot of emotions for him as well.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I feel like we need to just change the scene entirely for a few days. So just planning our holiday those few days in September made a huge change. I think for my daughter's like quote, we didn't do it for this purpose. By that point, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
We just happened to be, I remember we happened to be camping, I think. So I was thinking if it had been an issue, that was another really nice, because you're having such a rich experience that it doesn't feel like you're just sitting at home.
Yeah. We have friends who, I don't know how many years they've done it now, and their kids are still pretty young, but they go camping for not back to school, like the first week of school. And I think, they've kind of decided that that's what they'll do is they'll make it a camping week or however many days they go for. And I haven't, asked specifically the reasons. So I don't know if they find it tough, if that's why they go. I don't think so, but that could be part of it. But I think it's just kind of a fun thing to be like
space. It's probably
yes.
And the prices drop a bit too. So.
Yeah, there's lots of advantages, right?
Yeah.
But I really like what you shared about how sometimes it is just hard and it doesn't feel easy and it doesn't feel good and there's not much you can do to fix it. And I think that's helpful because I know I share with people, it's okay to try homeschooling. And I hear people say, oh, we're going to try homeschooling this year. And I think that's great. And I think it's really good for people to remember that you can try homeschooling. And if you find it doesn't work anymore, you change your mind, you can go back. But what I do wonder if like the amount of pressure that I think someone could feel about if we're trying homeschooling and then you just have one of those years where things aren't working, or I don't know, maybe just like a reminder that things can just take time. It takes time often to find homeschool friends or to find a homeschool community. Like sometimes it can take a long time.
Yeah.
And I know because parents, like you just worry and you want to make sure you're making the right choices with your children. I don't know. I think it's probably just helpful to remember that because I think sometimes it could be, they look at their September, if this is their first year homeschooling and this is their September and they're like, we haven't done anything, or what if just that fear, right? So just remembering or thinking about it as normal for like, you're not on a school timeline. It's okay if you don't even think about academics or learning, finish out the summer season. Like you can slowly go into it. And I don't know, it'd be so nice to ease any panic that some parents might feel around, well, we haven't found any homeschool friends yet. We haven't started our curriculum, like whatever it might be. Those are all like I know things I've heard and I totally get it. But just remembering that like, it's okay for things to look and feel different. And if it feels like things aren't working yet, that doesn't mean that they might, like things shift as we know. Right. And
well, yeah. And just because things aren't feeling, because I've heard this a lot too, where people will say, well, we tried homeschooling, it just didn't work for us.
Yeah.
And I've known that these families have come out of school because school was not really, really not working for them. And it was very like, sometimes kids had really difficult experiences there. And so it's always, I'm kind of like, yeah, but it's not, I think it's not something that you just, as you said, like a lot of elements to it can take a lot of time.
Yeah.
And it may not ever fit the picture that you have in your head. But sometimes, yeah, people will say, yeah, no, we went back to school, homeschooling didn't work. And in my mind, I'm like, but are the kids happier at school? Because
Yeah.
I don't, and it's fair enough. I mean, if a parent is really unhappy homeschooling, then it's probably nobody's going to be happy.
Yeah.
But I do think it is, I guess it's hard because school is always the default. So you
Yeah.
kind of feel, I think you feel like homeschooling has to kind of almost prove itself.
Yeah.
And I think that can be hard. I mean, if you're a parent who's eager, but you have maybe the other parent or maybe family members who aren't keen about it, maybe it can feel like a lot to prove as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just that reminder that sometimes for whatever reason, things are kind of rough.
Yeah. And I like how we talked about Haley's post because it, like you said at the beginning, it focused so much on relationship. And I think that
Mhm.
that can be most helpful in kind of dealing with worries and fears that parents might have. Like if you do intentionally slow down, spend the time with your kids, find things that you do enjoy together, like just start there. I
Mhm.
think you're more likely to start to feel okay and see that things kind of start to happen, especially if you can get into some type of community or just, even talk to one other homeschool parent. I think all of that can go a really, really long way.
No, absolutely. I feel like that really rounds up the conversation really well, Ashley. With the exception of the fact that I realized we didn't talk at all about curriculum or resources.
Whoops.
And we keep saying that we're probably going to do an episode about curriculum. So maybe like details around that are better left to like its own episode. But I think maybe just to say that there's always kind of the ongoing advice. If you are thinking you're interested in using a curriculum, just to kind of like go slowly and
Mhm.
and not to feel like you necessarily have to replicate what somebody else is doing. I think to your point, getting to know your kids really well outside of a school environment
Yeah.
helps because you'll start to get a better sense of how they tick, how they kind of move through their days as far as their natural rhythms.
Yeah.
That I think will help you figure out whether it's a fit, and if so, what might be a fit, right? But
Yeah.
but if it feels important, if it feels like an important kind of like support system almost to have, I think
Mhm.
it makes total sense to have some stuff, and that might even be a full boxed curriculum
Yeah.
if that's what's helping kind of bridge over, right? And for some
Yeah.
people, a full box curriculum continues to work forever because it's just a fit for them, or they approach it in a way that works really well. So again, I think it's not about, like we had said this earlier in the conversation, I can't remember what it was about. Maybe it was about planners and stuff. Or charts and schedules. It's not about like not having a schedule or not having a curriculum. It's just about our own relationship to it and
Mhm.
kind of what our attachment is to how excited our child is or is not going to be with it. So it's a tool, it's a resource. It sometimes feels good to have it around.
Mhm.
Um, but but just kind of lessening our grip on
Yeah.
fine how we feel that the week has gone or not.
Yeah. And I'll just say all of that. And it's okay if you don't have your curriculum or your like educational philosophy figured out for September.
Ah,
You can still pick a curriculum in October. Like if you're wanting to go that route and try a tool for whatever reason, you can get that at any time of the year. Like you're not behind. You and lots of times I think people do. They'll start with a curriculum if they are going, using a curriculum because that's what they want to use, or maybe their kids are even asking for one. They start with one and they try it out and they switch to something else partway through. So just
ah,
thinking for families like totally new to homeschool, right? Like because I can understand if it's new to you thinking, oh my gosh, I've chosen we're going to do a curriculum and I even know what philosophy or whatever, but I don't have it and it's September. And you don't need to worry about that.
Don't
It's
worry about
okay. It's all right.
back to that kind of like scarcity abundance thing around time, isn't it?
Yes.
I was just going to, I'm sure that I thought I had seen something in Haley's post that had actually just really spoken a little bit to this. And I was thinking it might sum it up, but I'm not totally seeing it now. So anyway, I can always kind of put it as a quote in the
right.
But I think it was alluding to the idea of there not being one right way. And so I think these are my words now, not hers, but like the information overload, I picture now, again, because when we started, social media was still a couple years away from having, and even when social media started, it didn't start around homeschooling, right? Or not so much, but I picture the information overload now being enormous.
Yeah.
So just knowing that.
Yeah.
And having a bit of a laugh about it rather than being like, you know, I think if like thinking of it as like, wow, we are incredibly spoiled for choice. Haha, rather than, oh my goodness, what is what is the one right way to do this?
We'll have to try to do an episode at some point on the curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which will be a long one for sure because of what you just said. There's so much.
It will be. Okay, so we'll leave that there then. And all right, thanks, Ashley.
Oh yeah, it was great. Yeah, it was lots of fun. Thanks, Erin.
And this ends our conversation today. We hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you'd like to connect further or see additional content, Erin can be found on the web and on Instagram at Everlearning. Ashley can be found on Instagram at Ashley as Mama and Storytime Shelves. And I, Hayley, can be found on the web and on Instagram at Taking a Kinder Path. We'd love it if you'd share this conversation with anyone you think might like it. And if you've enjoyed this episode, maybe you'd consider leaving us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We're so grateful you made time in your day to listen to us chat. Thanks so much for listening.